Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good, and you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Hello.
Oh, yay.
Is this for the?
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How's everybody doing?
Good, thank you.
Good. I'm so glad you're here. We have a couple more minutes. Everybody still working from home?
Yes.
Yeah. The centers aren't open, are they? You haven't reopened yet?
No, we're
We lost you there, Beth. Okay, so the centers are still closed?
Correct.
Do you know when you reopen? No.
Good morning.
I think Lynn can answer that.
Good morning, Christine and all.
How's everybody doing? Good?
I think we're doing okay. Yeah. All mostly, from home. A few trips into the office.
Mhm.
Immediate plans to bring everyone back to the office.
No immediate plans?
No, we're going to do summer services for children and families virtually.
Oh,
And then we'll be in some way in person come the fall.
okay.
We didn't feel like we had everything ready. It's such a changing environment.
Yeah, it's interesting because some of the trainings that I'm doing now are for companies that are really understanding that in addition to having to prepare the space so that staff and employees and teams feel safe,
Right.
there's also this real emotional component that's happening as well.
I agree.
This all transpired so abruptly.
Right.
So now how do you return also with this understanding that you are not returning to business as usual?
Right. Right. We have a survey going out to the families right now and then one to the staff to get a better feel for how everyone is doing and how they would feel when we do open up.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's
That's great. That'll be great feedback.
yeah. We put a committee together. So that it's been, we're working on it. We just are not ready.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that sounds like a good plan.
Thanks. Yeah. I think we're doing
I'll be curious to hear what the families say.
Yeah. We asked them very early on and they all wanted to come back. But now time has passed and they may be feeling differently.
Mhm.
And then we have to get our environment set up too, you know.
Yeah. Well, we'll go ahead and give it another minute or two, and then I'm going to go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Ooh, we've got 22 people here so far. That's
Oh,
great.
good. Yeah, nice. Today is our wellness day. We had
Oh,
we're
right.
doing our wellness walk.
Uh-huh.
And so everyone on their own and in their own time and whatever,
Mhm.
everybody's going to go for a walk, and then we're going to post pictures on our Facebook page.
Oh, that's great. I remember you and I talking about this wellness day
Mhm.
long before this, we even
Long
went
before,
over there.
right?
And in fact, I don't know what date it was, but I was with Beth at the JCC,
Hmm.
and she had to leave abruptly along with some other people because this whole notion of having to possibly close
Right.
was
Mhm.
upon us.
Yes.
And then that was it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
March 13th was the
Is that
day.
what it was?
That was the last day of work in person.
And that was the last day of my in-person work as well,
Right.
or like
Mhm.
completely.
Well, the governor, I mean, we were making plans, but then the governor pretty much said that was it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Well, as soon as the chimes, can you hear the chime of my
I can.
grandfather clock? We'll go ahead and get started. All right, well, it's 10 a.m. I'm Dr. Christine Preisinger, and I'm really, really excited to be here. A few months ago, I was doing some work with Head Start and around issues related to stress and wellness and emotional intelligence. And those trainings came to a screeching halt. And so it's really, really been wonderful for me to have this opportunity to bring some of that to you in this format. The other thing I love about the timing of all of this is that the timing is right. A lot of people called upon me for assistance right at the very start of the stay-at-home orders, which was 12, 13 weeks now. And I did a lot of this training, similar trainings at that time. And I don't know that everyone was quite ready for it yet. We were all scrambling to just sort of find our way. And now things are starting to settle. And what I've come to realize in other trainings I've been leading more recently is that in the settling, things are starting to come up that are causing some discomfort, because these are feelings, emotional states, overwhelm that we kind of had to put on the back burner just so that we could put one foot in front of the other and figure all of this out. So if you've noticed little spikes or increases in your anxiety, if you've noticed that you might have some blue periods, mornings where you wake up and feel more on the depressed side, all of this is completely normal, because this is what the system does. Our systems are designed to protect us. They are designed to defend us. They are designed to help us out when we need to scramble, pull things together. They are designed to be there for us when we sense threat. And our sense of threat was real. It wasn't perceived, it wasn't imagined, it was real. And so we had to kick into action. And when you think about what you've accomplished over the course of the last 10 to 12 weeks, it might shock you, especially for those of you who, in addition to doing your work, were also tasked with perhaps living in your family life very differently, perhaps homeschooling, perhaps having everyone at home 24/7, and perhaps in the lives of your families, that's never happened. For some of us, we might have partners, spouses that we're at home working with side by side. I've done a lot of family and relational triage over the course of the last 12 to 14 weeks, because although it's been wonderful for so many of us to be home all together, there's a lot of stress and tension that's also associated with that. So we've really navigated a great deal over the course of the last 10 to 12 weeks. And as things begin to settle, this is an opportunity for all of us now to kind of refocus back onto our own wellness. What I'd like to do is, as we're going through this module today, I'm going to stop periodically. I would love for you to use the chat function. If anything that I say resonates with you, or if you have any comments about it, just put it into the chat. So I'll stop periodically to open it up for discussion. And at that time, I'll also be looking at the chat. So here we are. One of the things that I discovered, not just in terms of a global pandemic, but when something really big occurs and we experience it as a crisis, the why matters. And what I mean by this is having a sense of why it is that we feel stressed, overwhelmed, why it is that we feel the unstabilizing nature of uncertainty really does matter. Because if I can understand why it is that I'm feeling the anxiety that I feel or the overwhelm that I feel, if I have the why, I have a better understanding then of the how. How do I meet this? How do I manage this in a way that's healthy and sound and reliable? Well, here's the why, the threat. And we've all really understand 10, 12 weeks ago what that threat felt like. What's different about the threat of a global pandemic is that the threat is not visible to us. We only have a sense of it when it is at work in our own bodies, or in the bodies of those we know and love, or in the bodies globally. So this enemy, this threat, isn't something that we can necessarily see, touch. So it feels like an unknown. And this mere fact of a virus being our primary threat, a very destructive threat, was very difficult for many of us to wrap our minds around. So the why, what felt threatened? First and most obvious, especially early on, we really worried about our own physical health and the physical health of those we loved. Our physical health was at threat, hence all of the measures that we've taken to protect our physical health. But as I already alluded to, and this came through very strong at the beginning of all of this when I was working in other organizations, especially organizations that were doing stay at home, is that family and relational structures also were feeling a lack of stability, because very suddenly we found ourselves living very differently. This idea that we're all home together and we are pretty much homebound indefinitely was very threatening to even the best family systems, to even the best marriages, the best partnerships. I could teach for a month just on the role that the threat played in our family and in our closest relationships. On top of all of that, strain was the strain of not being able to have physical access to other people in our life that we love. Perhaps you've been socially distanced from your aging parents. Perhaps you've been socially distanced from your beloved with whom you might have a long distance relationship. Perhaps you've had to be socially distanced for a period of time from a child who is away at college. So the distancing and trying to figure out ways to connect meaningfully showed up as a threat for many of us and caused stress. For so many of us globally, there has been a very real threat to our financial well-being, a very real threat to our professional stability. Will my job be temporarily altered? Will my job be eliminated? What happens to our family, to our relationships, if we are suddenly facing financial stress that might be indefinite in nature? When we go back to work, what is that even going to look like? Am I going to recognize the workplace that I abruptly left 12 weeks ago? I was having a conversation with a close friend of mine who works in HR for the PepsiCo company. And she said that overwhelmingly so, the calls that they have been receiving from their teams over the course of the last 3 weeks have pretty much been the same. And the question is, when are we returning to work? What is it going to look like when we return to work? How is it all going to unfold? Does our workspace even look the same way? Is my job the same? Am I going to have different kinds of expectations? So there's this new anxiety that's arising about going back. And on top of that, really contemplating, are we really going back? And I caution organizations, I caution them about using that language when we go back to work or when we go back to normal. And I advise, why not start talking about it as when we move forward and into something new and different. Now, there will likely be vestiges of what once was, but for the most part, many of us, including myself, are moving forward into a version of our professional and work life that's going to look really different. And by the way, I want you to think about all of these threats related to the families that you serve, because they're feeling them too. And in many ways, they are feeling some of these things in ways that are more extreme than we're feeling them. And then finally, there's been this overall threat to our national and global security, not just related to a global pandemic, but also related more recently to all of the civil unrest that this country is aiming to navigate right now. So in a lot of ways, our lives have been experiencing, and we have been experiencing, a shakeup at levels. To say they're unprecedented seems trite. To say that this is uncharted water seems trite. There really are no words to describe what's happened, what is happening, and still a degree of uncertainty about what is to come. Really, really quickly, this is an inherently stressful situation. First and foremost, our stress was fueled by a very abrupt need to act fast. Again, I was with you all around the 13th, or many of you, the 13th of March, and then never saw you again. Very, very quickly, everything shut down, including my own work. Very abrupt. Think about, if you've been continuing to do your job, how you had to scramble to do it differently. I had to take all of my trainings into an online format, a format that I was not only highly resistant to. I love teaching in person, and I swore I would never do webinars, never teach via Zoom. And very quickly had to scramble and figure out this platform. So a very, very abrupt need for change, a very abrupt need to act quickly in an environment that felt entirely unpredictable and uncertain. This might be one of the most important slides of today's presentation. And this is something that I want you to keep in mind as you're also thinking about the families that you serve. The loss associated with a global pandemic, and to some degree, the crisis that we're also experiencing over the course of the last 2 weeks or so, with both the riots and the protesting, these are losses that are real. And I want to just move through them and ask that you ask yourself, in what way did I experience or am I experiencing some of these losses? A defined loss is a very obvious loss. In many of the families that you serve, perhaps a job has been lost. Perhaps we know lives that have been lost. So it's happened. It's a loss that we can point to and identify. It's not vague. It's very defined. And then there is what is known as limbo loss. Limbo loss is an actual term, and limbo loss reflects losses that we're not quite sure about. For example, perhaps I'm experiencing symptoms and I took a COVID test and I'm waiting for the results. Anytime we take a test and we're waiting for results related to our health, we don't quite know yet if we've lost or not. We've all had experiences in our life where we're anticipating that a loss might occur, but we're not quite sure. So waiting for test results, being in a relationship with someone that we love and care about, and they tell us, I need to take a break. Not sure that this relationship is for me. A separation during a marriage. That period of time which can feel traumatizing or agonizing. The central question in limbo loss is, have I lost or not? Will I lose or not? Limbo loss is one of the most difficult versions of loss for human beings to withstand. Because again, it's this strange period of time where we haven't quite figured out, or we don't quite know, have I lost or not? Anticipatory losses, yeah, I know that I'm going to lose. It just hasn't happened yet. I know for certain that my role upon my return to work is going to significantly change. And the job that I was doing prior to COVID-19 is going to be really different. I'm just using this as an example. In the literature right now, in terms of what's happening in leadership and management, this is actually has a new name. It has a name, and it's called role loss. That many of us are going to be stepping into roles that were very different from the roles we were in prior to all of this. Even if it's a role that we're excited about, it's still a loss. But it's not a loss that we're necessarily aware of. And then finally, and this is a big one. Last night, I was looking at Facebook, and I saw several of my friends and colleagues were posting photographs of their children who were graduating in some of the local Catholic schools from 8th grade. And many of the graduation ceremonies were held in some of our local churches, socially distanced. And there was this one photograph that really struck me. And it was a photograph of an entire 8th grade class with their graduation gowns on and their masks on with their school logo. What was very haunting about the image for me is that when we're wearing our masks, we cannot see facial expression. We can only see the eyes. And none of the children looked happy. They might have been smiling ear to ear, but we can't see that with the mask. And I had a conversation with one of the mothers who was at that particular graduation ceremony this morning. And I congratulated her on her son's graduation. And she said, Christine, I never cried so hard. I was thrilled to be there and thrilled that the school was able to hold this graduation ceremony. But it wasn't at all what any of us ever imagined our son's 8th grade graduation would look like. That's grieving. That is mourning the dream of what I imagined this would look like. My son graduated from high school a few weeks ago. Same thing. Deep, deep mourning of the fact that he couldn't graduate in a way that we have been dreaming about, envisioning in our minds since he began preschool. Weddings that have been canceled. One of my colleagues wrote a very striking blog recently about what it has meant to be pregnant during the months of COVID-19. And it's a tearjerker. You know, she is very well, her baby is very healthy, but she talked about this isn't the pregnancy that I ever imagined. I never imagined that my baby shower would be held over Zoom. So I'm just giving you some examples, and there are so many of dreams and expectations that we all possess about our lives. Maybe it's related to your summer vacation that you've been planning now for many, many months that isn't going to happen, or a family reunion. It can be any number of things, but that's loss too. And so when people say to me, I'm so grateful that I have my job. I'm so grateful that people in my family are well, but I feel really off. I don't know why. I can't quite put my finger on it. One of the first things I will ask them is, have you considered that you might be grieving? And maybe walk them through some of these losses. In another environment, I actually taught about loss during this time, according to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. And it's profound to see the way in which all of us, to some degree, are actually moving through those stages of grief. And what we know about those stages is that they never happen sequentially. We're sort of all over the place with those phases, but loss is real. It's happening, and it's not just about tangible, defined losses. It's also about these other things, the limbo loss, the anticipatory loss, and the mourning of the dreams that we've had for our family members, big milestones that occur in life that just didn't get to unfold in the way that we anticipated. So I want to stop here, and I just would love to open it up to see if any of you have anything to share related to anything I've said so far. If any of it resonated with you, you can unmute yourself to share. Anybody? Anybody feeling any of this?
It's Lynn. I'll
Hey,
just
Lynn.
say that it all resonates. I mean, what you're saying is, in some way, we all have to be feeling pieces of that. So yeah, I think it's good to recognize it, because if you don't talk about it, you might not even know what it is you're feeling. So I appreciate hearing your words, and I can kind of put them into the context of my life. So thank you.
And that was my hope. Again, it's that first slide is, let's name the why we feel like we do. Beyond the obvious, let's dig a little bit deeper. We are all feeling, and again, and this is for you, these sessions are exclusively for you, but they also might shed some insight into the families that you serve and the losses that they might be feeling. And one of the things that we know about loss is when we're not quite aware that we're feeling it and we're feeling really off, that can show up as stress. And when it shows up as stress, we find ourselves lashing out. We find ourselves feeling really agitated, irritated. In a lot of the relationship training that I've been doing over the course of the last 12 weeks, what's happening is, let's say I'm experiencing losses, but I didn't know how to name them. And it's creating stress within me, in addition to everything else around me that's naturally causing stress. That stress that lives in me starts to spill over and into the relationships that I share with others. Therefore, it should be no surprise to us that we have parents of children saying things like, oh I heard a tone in my voice when I was trying to work with homeschool my child in math that I don't understand. At the same time trying to do my job, I heard a tone in my voice that I've never heard before, and it scared me. Or in homes where domestic violence occurs, I cannot even fathom what's happened in homes like that over the course of the last 10 to 12 weeks. We don't have the data on that yet. That's forthcoming. And I also think that it's really important to know for all of us, we've got a global pandemic that's still occurring. It's not over, but it's going to be followed by, very quickly, an epidemic. And the epidemic is going to be around mental and emotional health. So we've got to keep this in mind for ourselves, and again, for those that we serve. I think we're going to see a very different sort of manifestation of mental or issues related to our mental and emotional health. Because in a lot of ways, so many of us, again, not really aware of it, have experienced trauma. This has been traumatizing at levels that, again, we haven't even had an opportunity yet to study or to count, but we all feel it. And trauma has to be addressed. It has to be addressed, or eventually it's going to start coming out sideways in ways that can be very, very difficult for us to regulate and manage. Okay. Anyone else? How's this resonating?
Well, I think of, you talked about graduations, and we work in a preschool, and my daughter actually is finishing preschool this year too. So I think that's really something, for the kids to, even, you know what I mean? It's not as big as a high school graduation, but it is something, and it is, kind of their first experience with school, and to have it end so abruptly, and even just to see the isolation. I only have one child, so even to see the isolation of my daughter, that's something honestly, I feel so bad about that, because I just wish there were, other children that she could play with regularly. It's been weeks and weeks and weeks, and she's had very, very, almost no interaction. She had her cousins come over the backyard like twice, and, so that's really, really something. And the parenting aspect of it as well, just so much, like being kind of, me and my husband are all she has, so that's really something too that's very significant, that I don't think many people would know until it happened.
Yeah. And there was no way for us to prepare for this, but what you just shared is so significant in terms of how important regular interaction is at her stage of life. It's important all the time, but at her stage of life, to have regular interaction with other children, because of the way of how it helps us to develop as social creatures. I was just the other day reading some literature on what it might mean for children in their development should they go back to school in the fall and have to wear masks all day. The way in which children learn so much socially and emotionally by studying the facial expression of others. And this is what I think that this is why seeing that photo last night of all the kids at their 8th grade graduation with the masks on and their eyes just looking vacant. And I realized I have no idea if they were smiling or frowning underneath the mask because I couldn't see facial expression. And I think the reason it startled me so much is because I had just read that article about what is it going to mean for our children and their social and emotional intelligence moving forward if they have to wear masks as they go back to school, if recess is limited. We know that kids like to touch each other. You know, it's just what they do. If that's eliminated. So there are a lot of things, again, that we just have no idea what the impact is going to be. And as parents and as teachers, mourning, you know, what does it mean to have worked with a group of children for a good part of the year and to not be able to be present with them celebrating their preschool, kindergarten graduation. Just last night, I was observing my neighbors. They were in the yard with their 3 young daughters, and their daughter had her graduation from preschool last night, and it was a drive-by. It was sort of I guess they drove by the school and they were sitting in the yard eating ice cream. And again, it was very bittersweet. It was bittersweet to see that. So anyone else? One more person and then we'll move on. Any of this resonating?
I was just going to say that personally in my caseload, I have 5 families that will be transitioning in the fall or would have been over the summer. So when and if we go back in the fall, they'll be gone and I've been in their homes for a year and then won't see them anymore. So it's kind of weird to just abruptly end that when normally we have a process.
Oh, wow. What does transitioning mean?
Into the preschool instead of the home-based program.
Mm.
So instead of me being in their home, the kids will now go to the preschool, so I won't see them.
I see.
Half of my group will be gone.
That's loss.
It's a lot, yeah.
It's loss for you. It's loss for them.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Have you been feeling it that way?
Yeah, honestly, because we're in their homes every week. We know so much about them. I've had one family that just had a baby, and normally I would be there with them, and I won't meet this baby until he's months old now. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of different things that we're missing when we're there for all of it, and we can support them, and we enjoy it too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a lot of loss.
Mm-hmm. And being with those families is not only part of the work that you do, it's probably part of who you are.
Oh, of course.
And when we talk about role loss isn't just about, I'm doing different kinds of things in my job now. Role loss is also, I am not right now able to embody and live out my role as someone who goes into these homes.
Yeah. And a support system.
Mm-hmm. It's almost a certain loss of your work identity. Which,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and in this kind of work is tied up with, I'm sure your work isn't just work and home, it's part of who you are.
Yeah, definitely. So it's interesting.
So much. So let's go back and see what we can, so keep these, feel free. Oh, this is recorded, by the way. It'll be uploaded for you if you want to revisit it. But again, feel free to screenshot these slides if you want to revisit certain things. So here we are, and again, one of the things that I've been sensing in groups that I've been working with is we're experiencing a sort of emotional whiplash. There was the shock of the situation, the need to act very quickly and abruptly, both in our professional and our personal lives. Sort of a stability starts to set in where we're kind of getting good at the homeschooling, the juggling, the working from home, the Zoom, whatever it is. And now, high potential for many of us to start getting our minds around the fact that we might be moving forward back to the workplace in a way that looks really different. So, stress expresses itself very uniquely during crisis. Many of these things you might experience anyway as manifestations of your own stress, but some of them might be different, which makes it worthy for us to spend just a little bit of time. So as I'm moving through this, I want you to, if you can, just jot down or make a mental note of any of these things that you've been experiencing related to how stress might be expressing itself differently. What we're finding is in the physical body, many are experiencing insomnia or disrupted sleep. I can get to sleep, but I can't stay asleep. I would say more disrupted sleep. Many of us are going to bed bone tired. Many have reported that they quickly came to understand that working from home is not a luxury and it's not a vacation. Many people are working from home longer hours and more intensely. Dreaming. Many are reporting that the dreaming more, not dreaming more, being more aware of the fact that we're dreaming, remembering our dreams, and our dreams being dreams of turmoil, in other words, not pleasant. Very common right now. Over or under eating. Seen a lot about this on social media. I've experienced it myself throughout the day, finding myself standing in the kitchen with the refrigerator door open, not even really, it's like I was sleepwalking to the refrigerator during a work break. And I had to nip that in the bud very quickly and almost put myself onto a snack schedule. And then undereating, and undereating often arises when stress is very acute and chronic. We just don't have an appetite. Exhaustion at levels that we've never experienced before. This was certainly true for me in the first month or so of all of this. Between Zoom teachings, I was finding myself on the couch, setting an alarm, thinking I was going to take a nap, and feeling as if I had gone into a coma-like state, passing out. That kind of exhaustion is related to all of the things that I just talked about. It's exhaustion related to loss that may or may not be acknowledged. It's exhaustion related to uncertainty. It's exhaustion related to how hard so many of us had to work very quickly, very abruptly, so that we could continue to do our jobs, continue to manage our family lives. So the exhaustion piece makes perfect sense, and you might still be feeling remnants of that. A lot of this is starting to get kicked up again as teams, staff, employees start to anticipate or maybe have even received a return date from their employer. And of course, if all of these things are present, it shouldn't be any surprise that it would compromise our immunity at a time where we want our immune systems strong. Cognitive functioning, I can tell you that all of this has been true of me. It's less true now because I've been really working on it. Brain fog settles in quite naturally when we're just juggling too many things. Brain fog becomes part of the way that we are impaired cognitively when we ourselves are experiencing trauma but may not acknowledge it. And again, I mentioned this in some of our previous trainings. Brain fog is the experience of not being able to locate your sunglasses and they're on the top of your head, or you can't find your keys or your cell phone and it's in your pocket or your hands. Brain fog is things falling through the cracks even though they've been on your calendar. Intrusive thinking, very common right now. You might be working and seemingly getting your work done in a pretty productive and effective manner, and all of a sudden, like a speeding train, through your mind is some sort of thought that creates utter panic. And it's unwelcomed. It doesn't seem to necessarily be provoked by anything or anyone. It just comes in. And when intrusive thinking is something that becomes very chronic, it's akin to a really bad song stuck in your mind on replay. We've all had that experience where, for whatever reason, a song that you intensely dislike is just on replay. When that happens, we can almost be certain that we are in a stressed state, and that will come in as a distraction from having to deal with whatever it is that we're really, really afraid of. So beware of intrusive thinking. Tunnel vision is very, very common for those of us who are in stress response for a reason. If I am in the midst of or confronting a very real threat, it helps me considerably that I can take tunnel vision, meaning I can get really focused, really concentrated, so I can manage the matter at hand. The problem with tunnel vision is that it blocks out everything else that's around you. It blocks out cues, other thoughts, feedback, ideas that might absolutely be critical for the work you're doing, for decisions that you need to make. In other words, tunnel vision is very appropriate and very necessary in the midst of a very acute crisis. I need to be able to think clearly, directly, and act. But when it becomes part of a chronic stressed state, it really impairs us. This is especially true of leaders and managers, because the difficulty of leadership right now is not just making sure that your organization is doing what it needs to do to stay afloat. It's motivating and inspiring your teams. It's having a deep understanding of their own emotional needs right now. And on top of all of that and more, in many cases, it's having to reimagine this business in the first place so that there is a business moving forward. That kind of reimagining requires creativity. It requires innovative thinking. We don't have access to any of that. We don't have the ability to think out of the box when we have tunnel vision. So tunnel vision is really important in a crisis, but most of our crisis situations are time-bound. When you think about disasters that have occurred, 9/11, when you think about huge weather-related disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes that have caused a lot of destruction. The crisis event occurs. We experience the devastation of it, and then it's over. And we can begin to assess the damage and we can create a plan to move forward. In a crisis situation, most of the time, we are able to pull up the reserves of energy necessary to navigate the crisis, and we'll rest afterwards. We are in a very unique situation because we don't have a time limit on this crisis. So many of us have been reaching for reserves that we don't have. As one scholar wrote, this is not an ordinary crisis. This is extraordinary. Maybe one that, unlike anything we've experienced in our lifetimes. You can't even call this a marathon. This is an ultra marathon. And if you've ever seen the conditions under which someone must move through an ultra marathon, it takes tremendous energy. And an ultra marathoner who's going to make it to the end has to make very strategic decisions about their energy expenditure, as do we. So the way that I've been able to stay cognitively afloat, and this has been a real game changer for me, is to think about this as the ultra marathon. And I ask myself on a daily basis, what is the best expenditure of my energy right now? Maybe it's for this hour, for this next hour, what is most vital for me to accomplish? Or maybe I might look at it in terms of one day. What is most vital for me to put my energy into? And then that's what I do. And if I realize pretty quickly that I've been putting my energy into something that it's just not correct, I need to make a shift, I make that shift. But it's one of the ways in which you can combat any of this cognitive stuff that might be going on. So always remember that when stress response is high, brain fog will occur, that intrusive thinking will occur. We start to get very tunnel visioned, especially when the stress is chronic, as it is now. And we can become very fear-based and reactive. I do not want to make any important life decisions about my personal life or my professional life from a place of fear and reactivity. I'll give you an example. Very early on, this was even before I think we were at stay at home, I read an article about fear-based buying, particularly around toilet paper, how people were buying up toilet paper like crazy. You probably remember this. You may have done it yourself. High reactivity around toilet paper. And it was written from a psychological point of view, like, what was all of this about? Why was it toilet paper? And the psychologist who was writing the article said, it's because it was something that we felt we could control. I might not know how this is all going to go down, but by God, I'm going to have enough toilet paper in the house. So I read that article and I thought, wow, this is really interesting because there's a lot of excessive buying going on right now. Toilet paper and other kinds of things that, looking back, seem really strange. But many of us did it. The very day that I read this article, later on in the day, I heard the doorbell ring. And I went out to my front doorstep and there was this huge box that was delivered from Amazon. I had forgotten that I had ordered basically a case of toilet paper. And I had to laugh. I forgot that I made the purchase probably 2 weeks prior out of complete fear and reactivity. In other words, it was as if I was sleepwalking and made the purchase to the point that I had forgotten I did it. So when you look back even 10 to 12 weeks, you may have done some things that you don't even have a memory of right now. That indicates, or that's wonderful demonstration, an easy demonstration of fear-based reactive decision-making. I do not want to make any really important decisions about my life or my work from that mindset. I'm going to pause here just to open it up a bit and see if any of you are resonating. You can unmute yourselves. Anyone? We had some comments coming in here on the chat. Yeah, I feel it. I know I cannot sleep anymore like I used to. Sleeping is definitely affected. See, I'm not able to scroll down. There's quite a bit here though. Anyone want to share?
It's interesting that you talked about dreams. Up until yesterday, I didn't realize that I must be having dreams. My husband said to me last night, you know, you're really having weird dreams. And I said, I don't really know that.
Mm-hmm.
Said, because you're yelling out. And then 5 minutes later, I say, are you awake? And you're talking to me. And this morning of all days, I had a dream about Head Start staff. I know at Head Start, but they're not in my program. Like, I don't interact with them at all, except like maybe when we're all together. And I had this really bizarre dream about all of us and specific people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what that meant, but I don't know if I was thinking about this meeting or I'm not sure.
Yeah. I appreciate that you shared that. I actually consulted with a woman who I know, she's a colleague, and although she's a marketing and branding expert, she has very credible, sophisticated expertise in dreams, particularly as they relate to our neurology. And early on during this, I reached out to her because I was interested in very vivid dreams that I was having, to the point where I was dreaming I might get up to go to the bathroom and I was coming back to sleep and going right back into the dream. Like I turned the TV back on and resumed the movie, which I've never been able to dream like that before. And so she has subsequently led some webinars on this, but one of the things that she told me was many of our dreams, especially if they're bizarre, they don't necessarily have to be scary, but if they're kind of strange and you're dreaming about people that you don't even know that well, or you were dreaming about maybe some of the people that might be in this meeting, some of it is the way in which our brains are almost the way that I like to think about it is like as an incinerator. We're incinerating all this stuff, all these excessive thoughts that we've been having that we just don't need anymore. It's sort of like a mental garbage dump. We're just sort of releasing through the dreams. They're coming out so that they are up so that they can kind of go out. And then the other really important thing that I think might be useful for some of you who might be having dreams is, rather than focusing on the details of the dream, ask yourself this one question: how did that dream make me feel? Because really the meaning of the dream, or the purpose of the dream, is really about how it made you feel, both while you were in the dream and afterwards. So how did I feel as a character in the dream? And how did I come to feel afterwards about the dream? And just sort of pondering those questions might be able to give you some insight into how all of this is impacting our dream life, because the dream life occurs through our neurological system. And wow, our neurological system is going through a lot right now. Anyone else? Just looking here. Anxiety, mourning. Yeah, a lot of you are resonating even in the chat with a lot of this. So again, I'm glad. It's good to name it. Good to name
I
it.
just wanted to make a comment about, you were talking about purchases.
Yes.
I find myself, I don't know if it's because I'm too afraid to go out to the grocery store, or you can't really go to a retail place, but I find myself doing a lot of impulse buying just to kind of have that sense of I have something new. Like I feel like it's kind of making me feel better to purchase something.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
This is exactly why the Amazon truck, I'm sorry, it was UPS, was making a delivery just 2 nights ago. And the first thing I said is that for me? And he said, no. And it was for the neighbor. And I said, hey, it's 8:30 p.m. And he said, we have to stay on the road till 10. So you're not alone. Many of us are purchasing. And it's moved from things like cases of toilet paper to books to clothes. Yes, absolutely. We know that purchasing makes us, or can make us feel better. And part of the reason it makes us feel better is because it actually turns on a neurological system that's very, very comforting to us. And it's actually something that I'm going to talk about next week. And it's called the pleasure reward system of the brain. Sometimes I don't want to go into stress response. I don't want to go into fight, flee, freeze. Sometimes I'm going to call on a different neurological system. And that's called pleasure reward. And pleasure reward is, I'm feeling a lot of discomfort. This is stressing me out. I'm not liking this situation. I don't like how this feels. So I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to do something that makes me feel good. We all do this, by the way. Maybe it's, the easiest example is, someone told me recently, I'm eating so much ice cream. How many people have reported, we are shocked by the number of wine bottles that are in the trash at the end of the week. It's sort of drinking more, relying on comfort foods more, purchasing more as a way of calming that edginess of the stress response. We all do it. It only becomes problematic when we're experiencing real health consequences related to relying upon that neurological system to help us out. So, I don't want to eat too much ice cream because it's going to affect my health. We know for a fact, and we're going to see this down the road, rates of potential alcoholism having accelerated as a result of this time at home. I've talked to many, many people who are very concerned about their drinking. I had a conversation the other day with someone who said, I just realized that throughout the course of the last 10 to 12 weeks, it's only been twice that I didn't have a drink in the evening. And again, it's one drink. She wasn't saying, I'm afraid I'm an alcoholic, but rather, wow, I've been dipping into this pleasure reward stress response. And the main hormone that gets generated when we seek pleasure reward to relieve our stress is dopamine. And the way I like to describe dopamine is, wow, when dopamine is flowing through your system, you just feel like you have this warm blanket around you. It just makes you feel safe and good. And again, that's fine. But when it becomes chronic, when there's so much purchasing going on that I can't pay my bills anymore, then we really need to pay attention. But I want to introduce to you 3 neurological systems that are at work now. in so many of us. And when we learn about them, then we get to choose. We get to choose the neurological system that we want to have dominating as we continue to navigate this really tricky terrain. Just a couple more things before we depart. Our emotional well-being, this is not a surprise. Many of us have felt some anxiety, depression, high reactivity, lashing out, just not feeling myself. But now what I'm finding in the people that I work with is very erratic emotion. Waking up in the morning and feeling hopeful and optimistic, and then I get a phone call or something happens or someone looks at me in a certain way and suddenly I'm feeling panicked, depressed. I had a moment a few weeks ago, I was just pouring hot water into this mug, this tea mug, and having a full body panic attack out of the blue, not provoked by anything. So I'm feeling it too. So this erratic emotionality. Okay. And then finally, as I mentioned, stress in me will spill over and into my relationships with others. Stress will impact my professional functioning, even if I'm working from home. I might not feel as engaged in my work, very distracted. I might not feel as effective, as productive, really scattered. You know, at the beginning of all of this, and I work with and for myself, I realized that my entire house had become various Zoom stations, depending on the time of day that I was teaching in the light. I had piles of paperwork everywhere. Everything was just scattered. A complete manifestation of, a physical expression of what was going on here. So these are some of the very unique ways that stress might be expressing itself. I'm going to stop here. I want you to know that this recording will be uploaded and placed as a YouTube video. You will have access to it. I'll get all of that information to Lynn. And then between now and when I see you next Friday, I will also be recording a supplementary 30-minute webinar that you can watch on your own time that's going to give you some tools that you can utilize should you be experiencing any of these stressors. So I want to be very conscious of your time. Any questions? I'm happy to be here for another 10 minutes or so. Happy to take questions, comments before we depart. Really hoping that you all do your walks today.
Thank you, Christine. It was really a wonderful hour. Gave us lots to think about and I think it helps to know that you're not alone, right?
No, not alone.
It's a lonely time. So all of these feelings that people have, you know, that you're not the only one feeling that way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And again, naming it. I'm not alone in all of these strange ways that I've been feeling, ways that I've been perhaps acting out, ways that I've been thinking. I'm not alone.
Does anybody want to add anything before we?
I just want to say the fear and security are a true manifestation. When this all started, I didn't realize it, but apparently every night around 3 a.m, I get up, check all the windows, the doors, and I was wondering why I was so tired when I'm waking up in the morning. And so it's a true thing when you're just on autopilot.
Wow, what a statement. So did you not know you were doing that?
Nope.
Oh,
I check the alarm, make sure before we go to bed, lock everything up and go to bed. And then apparently I'd wake up and somewhere around 3, check all the doors, the windows, make sure the alarm was set, all over again. Mhm.
You know, that is a really powerful example of a lot of different things. It's an example of the stress response really, really acutely turned on, because stress response turned on is, I need to be safe. I need to make sure everyone in my family, my clan, my tribe is safe. And so much so that I will wake up in the middle of the night, not even be conscious of the fact that I'm locking my doors, checking the alarm system, because that is something I can do.
Mhm.
So it is a really strong form of, this is what I'm taking control over, much like many of us, myself included, bought excessive amounts of toilet paper. This is what I can do.
Mhm.
And forgot that I did that.
Okay.
Mhm.
So thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. So look for the recording. Again, once that's finished, this recording and also the additional 30-minute recording I'll make for you, which you will receive via email with a link. I will keep it private to Head Start, so there will not only be a link to YouTube, but a passcode that you'll use. Okay, so that this is not exposed out there in the world. Okay? Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or if you need anything. I'll also include that in the follow-up email. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christine. This was really helpful.
Good. And have a great day. Do your walk. And I'll see you next Friday, same time.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.